welcome, Hoosier fans, to a not-so-victorious and not-so-inspiring episode of the Assembly Call. At least not-so-inspiring game. Hopefully the show will come out a little bit better than the second half did for the Hoosiers. But tonight, your Indiana Hoosiers lost on the road at Penn State 64-49 in a game that IU, I thought, really battled back and played well in the first half. Left some points out there, as Coach pointed out on the halftime show, but at least went into the locker room tied. Didn't play well in spurts, but really showed some fight in the first half that turned out to be completely absent for the vast majority of the second half, as IU got outscored 36-21 after the break, with the number of those baskets coming late for IU. There was a stretch, I believe, over the first 20 possessions of the second half, IU scored 3 times. Turnovers were a huge issue a little bit in the first half, but in the second half, IU turned it over 12 times, in 18 times in total for the game, of which I believe 15 of those were steals by Penn State that led to 21 points. And you really need look no further than the disparity in points off of turnovers. That actually ended up being the final margin of the game this evening. And as much as probably the Maryland game and the Wisconsin game on the road, it was one of those kinds of efforts in the second half for IU. It was really disappointing. The guard play was a big factor, which we'll talk about as we move forward on the show, because the IU just did not get a great deal out of the backcourt, whether that be from a production or a leadership standpoint. So overall, a disappointing game for IU as they fall back to 5-5 in the league. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms, here with the coach, Brian Tonsoni, and special guest co-host, Chad Schwarzkopf, a.k.a. Chat Mob Chad, and we'll break it all down for you on this edition of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. And let's start this show the way we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. Obviously, the banner moment could not come from the second half, so I'll go back to a stretch at the end of the first half where IU made a really nice run, got some solid play out of Jerod Davis during that stretch, who came back in the game with 2 fouls, managed to not only not pick up a second foul, but really started a nice run to close the half. IU had struggled to score. I think had a basket on maybe one basket in 9 or 10 possessions. Jerod hit a cross to start a stretch where IU scored 10 points over the last 7 possessions, and had even a jumper from him from about 18 feet, gave IU a 2-point lead that they relinquished by giving up a tip-in as the half closed out. But it was a really solid stretch of basketball for this team. Jerod had those free throws, as I mentioned. Trace had a dunk on a lob that they had some success with in the first half. Armand hit a couple free throws. Trace had a putback, and Jerod hit that jumper. And that was really... if you, I don't know what win percentages and win probability, all that stuff, but if you charted just general feelings about the game, I think that's when IU fans were feeling the best. The rug would soon be pulled out from underneath them as they came out of the locker room in the second half. But I thought it was a really strong sequence of play by Jerod. He was really effective, really aggressive. Armand got to the free throw line by being aggressive, and that aggressiveness that defined that stretch for IU is what really went away in the second half, where Penn State was absolutely the aggressor, really took it to IU. Maybe if I can swallow it, read through some of their possession log, because it was just a parade either to the free throw line or to the bucket in the second half. But that stretch at the end of the first half, to me, was a Hoosier Proud banner moment for IU tonight. Our banner moment tonight, as always, is brought to you by our friends at Home Field Apparel, a company that was founded by an IU grad and remains based in Indianapolis. They have 60-plus different schools available on their website, in case you're looking to buy something other than IU gear after this performance. But IU was their first school, and they remain huge supporters of IU athletics. I think Coach has the Bison hoodie on tonight. I know that I have purchased, we've purchased a couple of the shirts they released over the course of the football season with different logos from some of those eras. So I purchased the one back from the Bill Mallory era when my family and I started going to games. They brought back the oval. They've got long sleeve tees as well. Jerod, as best I can tell, is now living in his long sleeve script IU t-shirt. And as we plan for the meetup, I'm deathly afraid that I will end up wearing one of the same shirt, Jerod and Ryan, in that stretch, because we've all bought so much from Home Field. But again, really comfortable shirts. The Assembly Call sweatshirt that Jerod sent to me for Christmas, just incredibly soft and comfortable, and The logos, as I mentioned, are ones that you can't find anywhere else. They do such a good job of going back into the archives, not only for IU, but for other schools as well, to get logos that you can't find anywhere else. And because you're a member of the Assembly Call audience, you get a massive discount when you order at homefieldapparel.com. You can use the promo code Assembly20 at checkout to get 20% off your entire order. That's Assembly20 for 20% off your entire order. So go to homefieldapparel.com today and get the most unique and comfortable IU apparel anywhere. All right, now it's time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts on the rest of our team. Coach, I'll throw it to you first. A lot of positive things to say on the halftime report. I assume the tone of your comments here will be much different, if for no other reason than you asked if we had a chance to set the record for the shortest postgame show ever before we came on. So I'm right there with you. I think many people want to relive parts of this game as little as possible. But what are your thoughts on tonight's game overall?
Well, the game of basketball is a guards game, and when your guards don't perform, you're going to struggle offensively, and Indiana guards were awful. They were awful. They were really, really good against Michigan State. They were really, really good against Maryland. Tonight, the guards were awful. They were 3 for 26 from the field. They had 7 turnovers. They didn't guard. You're not going to win college basketball games when your guards are bad. That's it.
All right, you're keeping up your end of the bargain. If we are in fact going to make this the shortest one, but yeah, that's true. We'll get into those guys more. But that was a really big theme, really big struggle for tonight. Chad, what about you? What kind of uplifting thoughts can you provide us with following that performance?
Yeah, I'm sorry, can't get too much uplifting from this one.
That's the big burden to put on you. That was unfair. I'm sorry.
I mean, I always try to go into games and before the game, I try to think of 2 words that IU needs to think about. And for this game, I said continue and attack. Continue the way the offense was playing, how we were getting a little bit better. We didn't do that. We started to maybe a little bit in the first half. We saw at least some good decision making, some good plays, some good inside out play. Maybe not necessarily out, as our guards weren't hitting anything. And then attacking. And we showed that, as you said, in the banner moment by getting aggressive at the end of the first half and being able to get back into it. But we totally lost that in the second half and could not find ways to get underneath. And, just like Coach said, an abysmal front court tonight and just something that hopefully they can put behind them and we can move on from here.
The toughest thing is, there are going to be tough nights offensively, and guards are going to struggle, and players are going to struggle. They're not intending to struggle. The players aren't going out there purposely trying to play bad. The disappointing part started about the 10 or 11 minute mark when it just looked like the effort stopped. In the first half, it was ugly basketball, but the effort was there. I thought they were really competing defensively. They fought back at the end of the first half and made it a tie ball game and gave everyone some hope. And this team has had situations where one end of the court does affect the other end of the court. And that is just frustrating. And that's a mental aspect. And yes, it is the responsibility of everyone in the program to try to even that out and level that out. But players who have a tendency to go up and down with their approach will revert back to the lower level of their training or the lower level of their toughness sometimes when things get tough. Playing at home, playing in a warm environment, in a regular situation, a lot less likely to happen. When you get on the road and face adversity, a softness sometimes can appear, and that's the disappointing thing from my point is at about the 10-minute mark when it got to be 7 or 8, it just seemed like the fight left this team, and that's just not acceptable. And yes, everyone in the program is responsible for that, but if you wear a jersey, you play to the final seconds, regardless of how you're shooting or how you're turning the ball over, and I didn't feel the Hoosiers did that tonight, and that's reminiscent of Maryland and the Wisconsin and the Northwestern game to some extent, and this team has it in them. And when the coaching staff and when the players find the inner strength to get it out of them, Indiana plays well, and I will say they've done that more than not. 15-6, 15 times they've been able to overcome their natural tendency to not play hard and not be as, to play casual and overcome those things. 6 times they haven't, and when they haven't, most of those losses have been bad.
Yeah, that stretch that you talked about, I didn't put timestamps on these, but I've been trying to do a better job of charting possessions and different things like that. So right about at least halfway from a possession standpoint through the half, IU had only given up through the first 18 possessions for Penn State. They'd given up 13 points, and they were down by, I believe, 6 at that point. So as bad as IU had played at the beginning of the half, and there's a meaningful moment that we'll get to that came shortly before this stretch. But here's the next series of possessions from Penn State. Got to the free throw line, only made one. Dunk, lep, put back off of a missed shot. They missed a 3, so it was the first possession in the stretch where they didn't score. Layup, free throw line again, free throw line again, free throw line again. Missed a jumper, then they made the wide open 3 at the end. Dunk, Stevens drive to the basket, turned it over at one point, another drive to the basket, although Curtis Jones traveled on that drive to the basket. But, I mean, none of those shots were more, the 3 that they made was wide open. But otherwise, they hardly even took shots that weren't right by the rim, and they were parading to the foul line, which is one area that when you look statistically at this game, Penn State came in 13th or 14th in league play and defensive free throw rate, and IU really struggled to get there, really struggled to get the ball inside. But, yeah, I mean, I saw what you saw. To me, it was the offense wasn't working. The offense had been just straight up terrible to that point, but they had managed to stay in the game, which was a little bit, in some ways, like the first half, where you hung around in some ways in spite of yourself, and then just basically packed it in toward the end, and it was just a straight line drive to the basket after straight line drive to the basket, and then on the other end, just the first shot that they could get would throw it up there. And I do think, to your point, there's a lot of comments have been made on mental toughness and all those kinds of things. At some point, leadership has to come up, and when the two captains on this team perform the way that they did tonight, I thought Devontae was. I struggle to believe, no matter what. There's obviously the argument to be made that IU needs Devontae at times to be able to do this because they can't create their own shots. I have no idea tonight what Archie thought he was going to get by continuing to run him out there, and how that outweighed the potential benefit of what you could get from Armaan Franklin, if nothing else, from an experience standpoint. That's really where I struggled. I thought Devontae was really throughout selfish with the shot selection, careless with the ball, casual with the ball, and at some point to continue running him out there, you get what you tolerate, all those kinds of things. This team certainly doesn't have a lot of options to turn to at guard, but I really struggled with, during that stretch, watching some of that play, how you continue to sit there and watch that.
Well, I
struggle to continue to sit here and watch it. So
yeah, I get that, but there were 9 scholarship players available tonight. You have Phinisee, who obviously is battling injury. When the game gets out of hand, are you going to put Phinisee back in because Green made a turnover? At some point, you just leave Green out there and say, okay, you want to play the way you want to play. I mean, because we're not going to win with you out there. We're not going to win with you on the bench, and we're going to get our best player injured. I do understand. I would say Franklin playing a little bit more minutes. And I will address this, and I know people disagree with me on this, but you're not going to play the walk-ons because if you're mad at the kids for quitting, the coach can't quit. And people tend to forget that because we had Bob Knight who did that in the famous game, and everyone loves all that. But a good coach coaches until the buzzer is done. And Archie was standing up and coaching, and I don't know if he's a good coach or not. I don't even want to get into that, and the chat mob's probably going to vilify me for that. But Archie was still standing up, and it's hard to coach when your team is down like that. But if you just sub out everyone and play that with 5 minutes to go and it's an 8-9 point game, that's quitting on the team. That's not good either in my book. So, I do agree. I'm frustrated with Devontae's play. I do think he needs to play less. It got to a point, though, when you're down 8 or 9, you hope to shake the pop bottle up and go on a wild streak with him hitting 3 threes and getting you back in there. It's probably not going to happen. So there's a lot of consideration that goes into it other than bad play, sit. As the ultimatum of a coaching staff. So I just ask people to think about that there are different situations and different thought philosophies going in. And when everyone's playing bad, there wasn't a guard on the roster that was worth a darn tonight. And I like Rob and I like Franklin and Al plays hard and practice hard. None of them played well. So you can't play 5 centers.
Well, I think it was at least a chance for it. I think Armand towards the end there, we saw a little bit of a flash when he got in there. He took that drive almost coast to coast, got fouled. He has moments in a few games, and he showed before, where when things are down and at the end, he can try to be that spark to get in there. And maybe coach needed to go that sooner, or Armand with a little more confidence as he gets older within the team, he'll be more confident to get in there and try to make those runs sooner for the team. But I agree with you there that it's a toss-up. Do you put Armand in, the inexperienced freshman, to try to see if he's going to spark, or do you test the waters with Devontae and see if he can get a little hot hand at the end and maybe bring you back into it?
Yeah, I think with Armand, him is that at least he's going to make mistakes, but he's making mistakes trying to get downhill. He actually drew fouls a little bit better than some of the other guys did. That to me, it was his mistakes were less out of being too casual with it and maybe more being too aggressive. But that's kind of, I mean, to Coach's point, if you were looking for 5 guys who were playing well to put out there, you weren't finding them in this one tonight for IU. Coach, the other thing I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on was IU really struggled to get the ball inside in the second half. Largely because they were too busy turning it over, but in part because they really struggled to get to Trace. I mean, there were times he's catching the ball 25 feet from the basket out there. Did you see anything different that Penn State was doing schematically to try to avoid touches for him? Because I thought they did a decent job of getting the ball inside in the first half, but that was really non-existent in the second half. Anybody who watched the broadcast got to hear Seth Davis mention that approximately 715 times.
You know, sometimes the other team does a good job too, and it's not. Penn State's a really good defensive team. They're long, they're lengthy, they put a lot of ball pressure on the wings, and it is hard to throw the ball inside when you're being hounded. When you have to fight for every catch on the wing, we saw a couple of those go, for the pick sixes. It was a grind out game, and that's Andy, where you need to be mentally tough. And if when adversity hits, you're not mentally tough, then you don't look into the post, or then you don't feel confident getting it in there. Sometimes you got to force that ball in there. You got to shot fake and do all those things, and no matter how tough the defense is, you got to get it in there. I think Penn State just elevated their play. I thought they had a good strategy too. They tried to get Indiana in foul trouble. Brunk struggled tonight. Trace Jackson-Davis had a great first half, but a struggle in the second half. I thought Deron Davis played well. But yeah, I will credit. I mean, it's 50-50. I think IU's guards didn't execute the offense. They weren't sharp. They weren't cutting with purpose. I showed a little clip on the thing I put in the community today where when you're attacking the defense and the defense is in rotation, then post feeds become easier. Well, it's pretty easy when everyone's standing to guard the post and to discourage passes into the post. So it was a lack of execution combined with Penn State's excellent ability to guard that made it difficult, in my opinion, to get the ball into the post.
Well, I think it's one of those where I agree with you that Penn State did come out with a different level of intensity. And I thought they were, again, really the aggressor on both sides. I thought they got IU's bigs in foul trouble by really going hard. I mean, even the beginning of the half, they threw it into that Hara or Hannah, whatever his name was, and really just let him try to, bang into Brunk a couple times, see what would happen. Watkins, that was one of the better games I've seen Watkins play in his Penn State career. The fact that he feels a guy that you see that has a ton of talent. And they were really the aggressor on both sides, pushed IU out of there. And when IU really struggles offensively, one, they get stagnant from a movement standpoint, and two, they're real quick to take the bait from the other team of jacking open shots and making those kinds of decisions. But Chad, anything else you saw from whether it be scheme standpoint or just differences from first half to second half that really helped to undo IU?
I think it was right off the bat. I think Penn State had a great game plan of going after our bigs and getting them into foul trouble. Brunk is our toughness barometer. He's the one that really kind of sets the toughness tone for us. And they threw him off his game and put him on the bench and caused us to lose that kind of awareness for us and a guy that could be in there and kind of spark something for us. It took him out of the game, and then therefore it took the toughness of IU's team out.
Chad, that's an excellent point. Brunk and TJD are the lifeblood of this team, and Archie said that way back in the summer when he was at Evansville. We have to be an old man game. You have to go inside. So that's an excellent point. And when you hit Indiana where they're strong, and then it forces reliance on other people, you have a 50-50 coin flip, and coin came up tails today. If you called heads, it just didn't work for IU today, where it had worked in some previous games. But I think that's a great point about their strategy, Chad, at the beginning of the game.
Well, and I think IU responded to that by Brunk in particular. I felt like he was so worried about picking up another foul that he was so passive defensively and really just kind of backed off as they banged into him, which, given some of the officiating tonight, you don't really know who was going to get called for what. That certainly wasn't the difference in the game, but it was odd, I guess, to say the least. But yeah, he really seemed to get tentative, trying not to get that other foul to take him out of the game. But at that point, he kind of negated his effective by being that way. And this was definitely one of the bigger. He did get a couple of buckets late, but in general, was not one of his better games.
Well, at least in a way, it at least got Davis in there and kind of sparked our offense for the first half. I guess that was the only coin flip positive side to that, because Davis got a little bit more minutes and he was able to be a deciding factor, I think, towards the end of that first half.
Yeah, he did. Jerod did respond really well. That was, I mentioned in the banner moment, but that was one of few bright spots. But coming up, we're going to continue our breakdown of IU's 64-49 loss at Penn State. We'll point out today's meaningful moment you might have missed, and then go inside the numbers to highlight the most important statistical notes from the game. If you're listening to the Assembly Call, stick with us.
This is Jordan Hall, and I never miss a shot, or an episode of the Assembly Call.
Thanks, Jordan. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Coach Brian Tonsoni and Chat Mob Chad Schwarzkopf, and we are breaking down IU's 64-49 loss at Penn State. I feel like whenever I host the show, I use that intro with holes in it so I can think longingly about having someone who could shoot the ball as well as he could, but here we are. Makes me wistful for the days of Jordan Hulse. But so it's time now to talk about the meaningful moment that you might have missed. There are very few parts of this game that many people would like to relive, but there was one that was a turning point. I felt like in the second half. I believe the score was 36-32 at the time. It was not too many possessions, about 10 possessions into the second half. IU had not come out well, but Al had gotten to the free throw line a couple possessions earlier, and IU had the ball in a break after a missed three, and Devontae threw a kind of scoop lob to, I don't even know if it was Justin or Trace, because I think I became blinded with rage at the moment that the pass was released. But one of those guys. So turns out, the ball turns over. It wasn't a good pass. Just not a smart play. Penn State goes down the other end, hits a three, and just a huge 5-point swing there. I believe IU took a timeout after that. Just a really critical point where a bucket, even a two-pointer, gets you back within two, and you feel like you've kind of stemmed the tide of not starting the half very well. And who knows what happens from there. Instead, you really let what there was of a crowd get into the game. You let the lead get blown up to 7 points. It would soon become double digits, and that was really around the point, once it got to double digits, that Coach talked about, where IU really seemed to kind of pack it in from that standpoint. So that, to me, was a turning point in the second half of something that they really could have done. I thought it was emblematic in so many ways of just IU's casualness with the ball. A lot of turnovers, just trying to make simple passes to the wing that got intercepted and taken to the other end for a layup. He had one in the beginning of the second half where Rob just ran into Justin and dribbled the ball out of bounds. Devontae had a few entry passes that were not great. Just casual play with the ball in situations where the other team really ratcheted up their intensity, and IU seemed to ratchet its intensity down somehow. I don't know really of a great lead-in because I feel like we've touched on a number of these points. But, Coach, whether you want to comment on that moment or just the general kind of casualness with the ball, I'll take that whichever direction you want to.
Yeah, it's. I said it earlier. When you coach young men in the game of basketball, there's a certain level of you try to train them to a level where when tough situations happen, they default back to a level that's acceptable. But you're dealing with not just what you do in practice and inside your program. You're dealing with who that person is and that personality. And I'm not saying that anyone on Indiana's team is a bad person or has a bad, but there is a competitiveness. And in a week where we lost one of the greatest competitors ever in Kobe Bryant and the Mamba mentality, it is amazing to me that young people in lots of walks of life, I'm an educator and in the classroom, don't have a desire to do the best that they can as many times and as often as possible. And the casual play, the lack of attention to detail is really hard to coach out of someone. And you need to. And yes, Archie is responsible for doing that. But I'm just being honest to all the listeners. It is the hardest thing I've had to do as a coach is to coach casualness and a lack of toughness out of certain players. And sometimes it's not just what happened from Sunday to Wednesday, getting the job done in practice before you fly to Happy Valley. It takes sometimes years, if not whatever, to get someone to be at their maximum toughness, and you got to draw it out of their inner being. And it's just hard. And at times it just comes back. And as a coach, you can't really do a whole lot about it, and except you try to find people like hopefully Trey Galloway, who will dive on the floor and eat paint and do everything that you need to do, and you just get 8 or 9 of those guys. And again, but it takes time to fill a roster with those butt kickers. So that's that point. It's just more difficult than just simply wishing someone would not be casual. But boy, that play, and that's Andy, where even go back to the first half, the casual play in the first half that led to 2 pick sixes for 4 points, the opening tip, not fighting for that, and then a couple loose balls that got kicked out, one for a 3, one for a 2. There's about 11 or 12 points in just those plays alone, let alone the time that they didn't play hard at the last 10 minutes. So those are the games within the game.
I mean, what strange, meaningful moment might be to try to take away from this that's weird to say. We've now had all 3 of our big men show that they have a decent mid-range game. So we've heard that they've been practicing that in the practices a little bit. And so I think, what was it, the Ohio State game where we had Trace and Joey both kind of hit mid-range shots, and now Duran kind of jumps in there as well. And Ryan, I guess, would be happy at least with his form. His shot looked good, so maybe we need to continue to practice that, and that's where we'll find some mid-range game for this team.
Well, Chad,
find somebody to space the floor.
No, and Chad, you bring up another great point here. We can nitpick the guards were bad and then say that, Archie needs to be held accountable for not developing the guards. Well, who thought Trace Jackson-Davis was going to lead this team in points and rebounds? Who thought Joey Brunk was going to come in and do what he's doing? And look what he's getting out of Duran Davis. So be critical of Archie and where he needs to be, and maybe roster construction and taking timeouts and doing those things. Those are up for criticism. But if we're going to sit here and say the guard play is Archie's responsibility, but the post play is just the post players playing well despite Archie, I just think that's unfair. And that's a little bit of the anger coming out as a coach, because it gets old having people sit up in the stands who aren't in the fight, at least trying to understand what's going on. So there's some good and some bad in this in tonight's game. Smith had 13 points and 6 of 8, but he didn't play super well. Trace Jackson-Davis had 14. Brunk has played well, and Duran Davis played really well. So, that's all I'm asking for is fairness in the evaluation, and fairness in the fact that when we beat Michigan State, everyone's happy, and when you lose to Penn State on the road, which is really tough in the Big Ten, it's automatically, get rid of everyone, and the sky is falling. But we're 15-6. You're a 7, 8, 9 seed in the bracketology, and you're not going to go away from that because everyone on the bubble is awful. unless you lose 19 rest of the games. And I know last year's, so it's possible. So take a deep breath. This team battled for a half and then came back to some of its old things, and there's a hole in the dam. We got to plug it and move on. And you don't want coaches to quit. You don't want players to quit. It was a bad night. It was bad offense, bad coaching, bad defense. Let's go. Move on.
I'm amazed there, Coach, that you forgot about your best buddy when you're giving Archie the credit for coaching the bigs. Your best bud is there on the bench, and Mike Roberts. So he's been on the squad. Maybe he's helping him.
Yeah, I mean, and I know I bring a perspective, and he probably gets old a little bit too, and that those locker rooms hurt on games like this, and if you have a bad game as a coach, you hurt as well if you made bad calls and did things. But Indiana scored 76 points on Sunday, and their offense was great, other than the last minute of play. So, programs lose because coaches were bad, and programs lose because players were bad. But it doesn't mean that the sky is falling every time there's a loss. Penn State played better than Indiana tonight, and that's the truth.
Yeah, I thought one of the other things, and we haven't touched on this too much, was we talked a little bit about the foul trouble, but that was magnified by the fact that Race was unavailable again, and Jerome seemed like he was ill. I think they released a statement around halftime that he was ill and wasn't going to play, and I know a couple of the folks who were there said he was in and out of the locker room in the first half. And
you don't want to play with that condition.
No. No. Everyone
that's
can
really
connect.
Crappy. That's really crappy.
There, oh boy.
Well, that's when you're happy you're in your away jerseys rather than your home jerseys.
Exactly.
But I think that was a really big factor. Not just because Jerome was coming off of a really strong game, but it was another guy that maybe could come in and make shots and help you space the floor. And I thought it was Matt Fit because Demise didn't play particularly well. He rebounded all right when he got in, but took some questionable shots. Struggled a bit on defense, I felt like, and just really didn't see him in the flow of the game. Just was struggled with movement offensively, kind of moved into somebody but wasn't really setting a screen, just kind of got in the way a couple times in the first half. Just really put IU in a difficult spot between the foul trouble to the first half. Justin Smith had 2. Brunk had 2 and Davis had 2. They managed to get through playing Joey and Duran a little bit without picking up a third, but just were not a lot of places to turn. And I think the loss of those two guys, some of those toughness plays are ones that Race could make, or coming up with a loose ball that may lead to a offensive rebound for Penn State, but he may track it down and get it back for IU. And you've got Jerome again being a guy who can score and maybe be a bit more versatile on that end, and really anybody who could have done anything offensively would have been a welcome sight tonight. So be remiss if we didn't say that those guys being gone weren't a factor. Wasn't the deciding factor in the game, but certainly exaggerated some of the things that weren't going well for IU.
What have we done to the basketball gods that in the last 2 years, Race Thompson played one of his better halves against Michigan State and then gets undercut and has to sit out 2 games. Jerome Hunter has a breakout game with shooting and defense and was just fantastic, and then he comes down with the flu in the next game. I mean, I'm not an excuse guy. We got beat by the guys that wearing Indiana jerseys that were on the floor. This is my team from the movie Hoosiers. I know, I get all that. But, man, what have we done to deserve, after 20 years of not being relevant, to having at least 2 part-time players playing a role and not having them available for a very tough road game? Well, it's just frustrating as a fan.
It's not only a tough road game, but a game that now we look at playing Mr. Hindsight, and what were we lacking? Ball going in the basket, and that's what Jerome can bring and has showed that he could bring last game. And we also we're lacking toughness. And what does Race bring but toughness? So that's where it gets frustrating, like you said.
Chad, you get host of the week, man. You've been spot on. I go off on these rants. I'm just going to say, Chad, speak. It's good stuff, man. Seriously.
So I don't know if any other meaningful moments for you guys. You may want to just prolong it so that we don't have to go over to the statistics. So if you've got any, now would be the time to fire him off. But
I just wanted to bring up, because guys are chatting about. We've said about the foul calling and everything. It did look a little awkward where you breathed on Lamar and you suddenly we got called for a foul, and Archie kind of towed the line. I think his a quote from him in the post game is, "No idea why we're not getting to the free throw line." So that's about as close as a coach can toe the line to saying the officiating was questionable without getting calls from the head office for a fine or something. And it did seem to kind of get in the guys' heads tonight and does get frustrating. And you see those, and then you see random balls, Justin Smith passing it to Al Durham, and suddenly it makes a 72-degree turn to the right. And then I don't know. I don't think anyone really knows. Did you guys see, or could you figure out why Archie got that technical?
It felt like my only guess is, I don't know what he said. He seemed to be incredulous that it was something he said, but I think it was a case where Al drove into somebody a little bit, got his hands all over him. Al backed out, and I think it was somewhat of a culmination of some of those other foul calls, but I don't know what he.
It's probably Coach Roberts.
It didn't look like. They didn't get close enough to really tell. Archie was clearly still standing next to him, and he turned around, but I don't know. All right, so let's take a quick look at stats, which will be wildly depressing. One of the things though, just to touch on this, I wrote down a couple things even coming into the game, just statistical things that may or may not decide the game. And so you had coming into the game, Penn State was 13th in league play and defensive efficiency. A decent amount of that was they got lit up by Ohio State in their first matchup back when Ohio State was playing well. But still, we're 13th there, 13th in defensive rebounding, and 14th in free throw rate. However, on the flip side, they were third in turnover percentage. They might be first after tonight, but they were first in steal percentage. They'll definitely retain that after tonight. And those, to me, were, from a rebounding standpoint, IU did a relatively good job, but gave up. Penn State rebounded from percentage-wise. They got each team got 11 offensive rebounds. There were more rebounds to be had when Penn State shot because IU turned it over so much. But from a percentage standpoint, IU didn't really take advantage of that all that much. Actually got outscored on second chance points, so didn't take advantage of that. Only got to the free throw line 10 times over the course of the game. Did make 9 of them. So I think I saw somebody on Twitter joke that this is the game that IU would shoot 90% from the line when they only get there 10 times. But, from a free throw rate perspective, that's well below what Penn State was giving up. And then the turnovers, as we mentioned, 18 turnovers for IU. I have not looked yet what the percentage on that is, but it can't be good. 25.7. It looks like on the box score that I'm looking at, this is 7 of 20 on layups. My God. So it just... the turnovers, Penn State turned so many into points. There were so many live ball turnovers with all the steals. They had 15 steals, and as I mentioned before, 21 points off of turnovers. That was just those differences. IU was unable to take advantage of the areas that struggled coming into the game and were exposed by the areas that Penn State had excelled statistically coming into the game. And you really don't need to look a whole lot further into it than that. Coach did mention some of the shooting numbers from the guards. IU's guards overall were 3 for 26, if I'm reading this correctly. Al was 1 of 7, Rob was 0 for 6, Armand was 0 for 3, and Devontae was 2 for 10. And everybody that played for IU got a turnover, so that was relatively equally distributed. Any other statistical things jump out at Coach?
Well, you can't win basketball games shooting 33.3% from the field. Whether that was shot selection, execution, play calling, whoever's responsible for that, that's just a bad game. And then you couple that with 18 points that lead to, 21 points off of turnovers. Those are just stats that say you played bad. And it's obvious. And it's just frustrating when you hold a team. I think it was points per possession, 9.938 or something like that, well below 1. And you only give up 64 in a game and you get beat by 15, it just smacks of the Rutgers effort again. And in the whole, Indiana has played pretty solid defense back since that Maryland debacle. and you lost 59-50 to Rutgers and 64-49. So the defense is traveling right now on the road, and what Archie and staff and players have to dig down and deep is find out how to play offense on the road, because they're playing offense okay at home, but the shooting percentage and the lack of getting to the foul line and the turnovers just not conducive to good play.
Yeah, Chad, any numbers from this that we didn't beat into the ground already that jump out to you?
No. I mean, I don't think there's anything else other to beat in the ground. Just to inverse the best numbers we've seen with 22 assists to 6 turnovers and completely flip that. It's just kind of the tail right there.
That's the frustrating part is how on Sunday it could be so efficient. And I know Maryland's probably not the greatest team defensively, and you go up against a team that averages a lot of steals or gets a lot of steals, so it happened tonight. So there's part of the explanation, but that's what's so frustrating is when you think you've turned the corner, and then you just go back to the depths that you were at 3 or 4 weeks ago. But let's just hope it's a blip, and you can get back to doing some things a little bit better against Ohio State.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to figure out what to expect from this team too much at this point. But yeah, it's another game, Coach, like you said, against Rutgers. I mean, you hold a solid offensive team in Penn State to less than a point per possession. I think, as you said, the one I'm looking at has it at .93 and 64 points. You shouldn't be losing by double digits at least, but your defense is putting you in a position to win, and I think that has really been an area that IU has gotten substantially better at and played really well at recently. But these offensive walls just continue to bite this team. And I guess it's as good a time as any. We'll kind of wrap up this segment touching a little bit on the guard play again to circle back to it. You know, Al and Rob started in the backcourt. They were a combined 1 of 13 from the floor, ended up with just 5 points between them. Those all came from Al. He hit a 3 early in the game. I think might have been the first or second basket that IU got. So he had that. 5 assists between them. Rob did lead with the team with 4 assists, but 4 turnovers between those guys. The Phinisee one, it continues to be difficult because he missed some shots close to the basket. I thought he at times was aggressive driving to the paint and at times was really unaggressive driving, more going east and west than the other way around. I just struggling to really get a read on what his capabilities are and what the root of his struggles have really become. So, Coach, I'm going to throw you the potentially unanswerable question with him. But what are you seeing? Is this a case where, again, they don't have a lot of guards? I'm not clamoring to see more of Devontae at this point. But do you think it's something physically that is it worth sitting him at some point? He just still doesn't quite look like himself, even though he shows flashes of it.
Yes, I think I agree with you. Rob Phinisee, Trace Jackson-Davis is our best player. Brunk is our best energy guy, but Rob is the glue that makes this team go. And we've played better basketball. Indiana's played better basketball since Rob's been inserted into the starting lineup and gotten, 24 to 30 minutes. But it's also obvious, Andy, that he can't go that long. I think he laid it on the line against Michigan State in guarding Cassius Winston. I thought he had a really good battle with Cowan, and then he took a little bump at the end of the game, and everyone was wondering, and he just was not himself. And so when you have your energy guy having to sit because of foul trouble and just struggles in Brunk, and you have your glue guy, point guard, who guards and runs the offense, he still got 4 assists tonight. You're taking 2 of your 3 best players overall out of the game, and then you just got to rely on other players. So I think that's why you see him being subbed out at times when we wouldn't want him to be subbed out, because I think there's probably a minutes type of situation, or they're really watching him for fatigue at some point. He got subbed out early in the second half, and I thought that was to Indiana's demise. I think it was before the first media timeout of the second half, and that's when Devontae struggled and the game started to get out of hand. And so, again, if it's by choice, then, yeah, I'd be critical of Coach Miller for subbing out Phinisee just by choice in that situation for Green. If it's health reasons and fatigue and you're not just getting stuff out of Phinisee and you need to sit him for a little bit, then Yeah, I agree. Maybe you go to Franklin there, but you need someone, and Devontae's just coming off a good game. I can understand where a coach would probably go there at that 17-minute mark. But yeah, Phinisee needs to play well. If he doesn't, the team's going to struggle.
Well, and I think that's it's tough because we haven't seen that ideal version of Phinisee for long stretches, like we got glimpses of it last year. And that hurts. But I do see myself in these games, even though we're not getting the perfect version of him, when the team is down or struggling, I'm looking at who's in there and Rob's not in there, and I'm immediately begging for him to get into this game and try to settle down this team. I think maybe some of the struggles as well for him is he may feel a little bit more load on his shoulders because he doesn't necessarily have that scoring threat 2 guard there next to him that he can relax and play off of. I believe he's got to have that kind of person for him to be really strong, someone that he knows he can dish it to and can get a basket for him, so he doesn't have to worry himself to go get that basket if he's not able to get it into the post. But we still do, whether it's conditioning, health, like Coach said, we need him out there for as many minutes as he can healthily give us.
And I'm a big Rob Phinisee fan, coached against him. I think he needs to be tougher too. And what you said there too is I think if he's feeling pressure that he has the whole weight of the team running his shoulders, he just needs to go out and do what Rob Phinisee does and then and let it go. But I think sometimes he's trying too hard, and that's a little bit of a lack of toughness. You just got to be who you are and play. And it just seems like he gets caught in positions, tries too hard to throw a bounce pass in traffic and bounces it off a foot. And he just needs to settle down and be Rob Phinisee instead of Superman or whatever he might be trying to do. And that's just a guess. I'm not down there. I don't know the young man. But, yeah, we're not seeing 100% Rob Phinisee. And even at that, he is our best guard. And the options are very limited at running the team and decision-making beyond Rob.
Yep. All right, well, coming up on the assembly call, we'll hand out our game balls and hit any other lingering storylines. Then we'll look ahead briefly to IU's next opponent, and then it'll be time for last call. That's all next here on the assembly call. Stick with us.
This is Nick Zeisloft. I never miss an open 3, and I never miss an episode of The Assembly Call.
You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game, plus every Thursday night at our website, assemblycall.com. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for our free IU Hoops email newsletter. Over 7,000 of your fellow IU fans have already subscribed. You can also text IU to 66866 to subscribe to the newsletter. That's IU to 66866. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Coach Brian Tonsoni and chat mob Chad Schwarzkopf, and we were breaking down IU's disappointing 64-49 loss in Happy Valley. And now it's time for game balls. I know, guys, I believe it was the Wisconsin game where opted not to give a game ball to anyone, but I don't know that is fair tonight. So I'll throw that quickly to you guys, whether you think we do one or we don't.
I think there's a couple options, to be honest, and we all need to be a little more positive. One of the things that drew me to Assembly Call to start out was the fact that there was honest evaluation with the tinge of optimism, even on tough nights. And I think we've all been struggling for many, many years, and that's just one of the things I think that I'm a proud member of this organization is that, yeah, we're frustrated, but we always need to find the positive. So I vote for us to give a game ball to make sure we're all a little bit positive heading into the Ohio State game.
Well, I usually lean on Jerod for positivity, and he's not here, but it would be hard. I would be hard pressed to go against that impassioned plea to continue with it and give some positivity. So I'd say we go with it. And with that, Coach, since you did say you had a couple options, I'll even throw it to you first to hand yours out.
So, if I'm going to walk the walk, I'm going to whatever that saying is. I'm bad with sayings. Talk the talk, I better walk the walk, or whatever that is. I have not been a fan of Deron Davis for many years. I'm going to give the game ball to Deron Davis. I thought he kept Indiana in the game in the first half with his 10 minutes of play. He had 7 more minutes in the second half. He struggled to score around the rim, only at 2 for 7, but he had 5 rebounds. I thought he guarded really well, had 6 points, and without Deron Davis, this game would have been out of hand earlier. And again, looking forward, we are 15-6, which is really good for this squad, I think, and trying to be positive about things on a game like tonight or a night like this. I'm just really happy for Deron as a person, to weather the criticism from all of us and to stick with this. And then maybe that bodes well for the future, even when we get Race Thompson back, that we have added post depth to handle tough situations like brunk and foul trouble and so forth. So congratulations, Deron. Glad you had a night. Let's keep it going, and let's try not to get the flu by Saturday.
Exactly. All right, Chad, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going to hop on with Coach as well. You gave an impassionate thing there about Deron. He's a guy that struggled, that coming into this season, we were expecting great things from him and hoping him to rebound, come back from his injury and play really well. And he's had some unfortunate fouls called him at the beginning of a lot of games this year. But he came in and gave some great moments. A great play I even remember in the first half when he got the ball underneath and got good position underneath his player and caused Lamar to come over against him, did a great shot fake to get him up in the air, and then dished a beautiful pass for an easy layup for Trace Jackson. And then also just for that beautiful outside game he has, his mid-range game that evidently he found in this game. Yeah, I'll give it to Deron as well.
Blossoming mid-range game, I would say.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, he'll get it because it's a democracy here, and that's where it is. And I think,
there's one other big person we can give it to.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about Trace, but I will say about Deron, it is both exciting and disappointing to watch some of this with him, because you look at a guy who, there's the one great spin move that he had, he just couldn't finish. You just see a guy who's been kind of robbed of so much of the athleticism that he had coming in, and that part is sad to see. But he is a guy who I think really appreciates being an IU player. And maybe I'm reading too much into this, but when we went to the Arkansas game, we went down on the floor after the game, and sometimes the players will come out and do that. He was the only guy that went out there. He went out there for long, and he didn't play in that game. I don't think he played a minute in it, to be honest, which, given the way that Arkansas plays, probably isn't super surprising. But he was out trying to talk to people and do whatever. So that was a moment with him that I appreciated. But I'll talk a little bit about Trace. I mean, he made a play. One of the other things I had for a potential meaningful moment, which would have maybe been better had IU actually won, but it was one of the very first plays of the game, and he missed a shot by the basket. Other guy got the ball, but he didn't give up on the play. It ended up tying him up, and IU ended up getting the arrow. Don't know if they scored at that point, but just a kind of hustle play, a toughness type play that he made, and overall over the course of the game, he had 14 points, 7 rebounds, led IU in both those categories. Justin Smith also had 7 rebounds. Did have a couple turnovers, managed to stay out of foul trouble. He got taken out a little bit in the beginning. There was a call where allegedly he hit Lamar Stevens on the arm on a jump shot, and then it was one of those where it was within the first couple minutes, picked up a foul and trying to make sure that he didn't get another one and would end up sitting on the bench. He ended up just with 2 fouls for the game. But I thought another solid game from him. Continues to not back down from some of the challenges that the physicality of the Big Ten will bring. So a solid game from him. But Deron Davis, the winner of tonight's game ball, which I am relatively certain is his first. So he joins Jerome and Armand with 1 game ball. I think he's maybe the 8th player on the team to win one so far this season. So congrats to him. Again, a solid performance off the bench, and one that was pretty good, and hopefully a good sign of things to come. He's strung together a couple good performances in a row. In terms of other storylines that we haven't hit, I don't know that there's a ton. We haven't touched a whole lot on Justin Smith, which I suppose we probably ought to. He ended up with 13 points, 7 rebounds, 6 of 8 shooting. Did have 4 fouls, 3 turnovers. With him, I know, Coach, you alluded to him a little bit earlier. I thought it was an up and down game from him. I thought some of the turnovers fell into that more casual nature. I thought at times he did an okay job defending Lamar Stevens, and that was a guy he had defended well a year ago. But then I felt as the game went on, he really either wore down or fell into the same trap that a number of the other guys on the team did. But I guess assess his overall performance in your eyes tonight.
I think he had an average performance. Justin Smith is just an interesting player. He guards well. He can score. He can rebound. I think he's been a little more consistent this year, and still he struggles with that casual play, and it hurts on some offensive decision making. I think it hurts in some shot selection. Although the one bad shot he took today, he drained a three. There's that. And I do think, Stevens is a great player, and Stevens is going to get hot. So we all need to be careful. I felt the same way as you said. I thought he got worn down or kind of didn't guard as hard in the last 7-8 minutes, and Stevens was able to just get going. I'm afraid I don't want to fall into an easy take on that because the Stevens is that good. And so he's tough to guard. But it sure looked like that, and there's some times where he's casual and misses his cutters. So, but what I've learned about Justin Smith and come to appreciate about Justin Smith is that his ups and downs aren't game to game. They're kind of within minute stretches, and at least that's somewhat acceptable. I don't really like it, to be honest with you, but it's somewhat acceptable when he doesn't have a full game anymore that I think is just really out to lunch. It's just smaller segments, and sometimes it's key segments, but we'd be lost without Justin, to be honest with you, because he does so much.
I think he's a player that we talked about earlier. I talked about earlier in the season that he's one that you have to get involved early in the offense, and games where he scored the points early on, or been even the first possession, is when he's had his best nights, and he hasn't had that kind of look or go to as of recent. He missed some opportunities. I believe the team overall missed some opportunities crashing the board tonight, and he did what he could against Lamar. I felt like I even made a note early on that we needed to switch Justin Smith on him because I thought that Lamar was a little bit too fast for Trace Jackson, but then it seemed like he was maybe a little too big for Justin at some point. So I don't know if Lamar put on some extra pounds in the offseason, but he was able to bully Justin a little more than we've seen all year long. But Coach, fantastic point there with I haven't really felt this year like we've had bad Justin or frustrating Justin, the Justin that you just want to shake. We've just kind of had mediocre Justin or excellent Justin.
Yeah, he does just kind of ebb and flow over the course of the game. And I think we've talked about that on some other shows where he's a guy that Archie is willing to stick with because for the most part, he knows that a potential turnaround is coming from him. And I agree with you on Stevens. I think there's times when he settles for his outside shot a little bit too much, and he doesn't particularly shoot it well from three, but he can be relentless attacking the basket, and he's got the body that he can absorb the contact. But if referees are giving foul calls, he's a guy who can get to the line a lot. And I thought he shot uncharacteristically poorly from the free throw line tonight. So I guess we'll see. But so quick look ahead for IU and for us. So tomorrow night, Thursday night, we'll have Assembly Call Radio. Jerod and Ryan will be on. They'll give their thoughts on this game with a little time to digest what happened and process the emotions and feelings of that. And then IU goes to Ohio State on Saturday. Jerod has Mark Titus lined up to be on the postgame show. I will not be on. I'll be coaching a game right around that same time. And then we've got the live IU Purdue postgame show at Switchyard on February 8th when we're all in town. I'm really looking forward to that trip. Always good to get back again to Bloomington. From an Ohio State perspective, they did pick up a win on Sunday night at Northwestern. Ended up winning by 12. It was pretty close throughout. Heading into that game, they had lost last 6 of their previous 7 games, I guess it is, with the only win coming at home against Nebraska. So really, since beating Kentucky on December 21st, Ohio State is 2-6 with the only wins coming against the lowest 2 teams in the Big Ten. So you don't really know too much what to expect. Could be a case where they start to figure some things out, get a little confidence by getting back in the win column, and we'll see what happens. Kyle Young's gotten back into the mix for them after being out. I know he came back in the first IU game, so he'll be back. And any road game for this IU team is going to be a tough one at this point. If you look at the road games in the Big Ten, they lost at Wisconsin by 20, lost at Maryland by 16, but it really was more than that. Lost at Rutgers by 9, did win at Nebraska, and then lost tonight at Penn State by 15. So the vast majority of those road games for IU have not been competitive, and I think that's where you kind of take a wait-and-see approach. We've seen this team bounce back within the season, come back and play well in games after disappointing performances. It's just one, though, that when you look down the schedule, it's really hard to look at the way this team has played on the road for 40 minutes in over the course of a 40-minute basketball game and say this is one that they're going to be able to go out and get. Doesn't mean that they can't get any of those games, because there have been stretches of each of those games that have really been in it, and then they go into a lull and really struggle. So to me, I guess that's the biggest lingering question of anything is who, if anybody, can this team beat on the road? And the answer so far has been pretty hard to come by, and so that game against Ohio State will be difficult. They've had a week to prepare. They won't have played since that Sunday. I know Archie alluded to that after one of the games where both Penn State and Ohio State had gotten the better part of a week to prepare for IU. Not sure how much of a factor that really was in tonight's game necessarily, but that at least is out there. So with that, we'll kind of close up here. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show, and remember that because you're an Assembly Call listener, you get 20% off of your entire order at homefieldapparel.com with the promo code Assembly20. So if you want a great deal on the most comfortable and unique IU apparel that you'll find anywhere, go to homefieldapparel.com and use the promo code Assembly20 for 20% off your entire order. All right, guys, it's time for last call. We'll get our final thoughts on IU's loss to Penn State by a final score of 64-49. Chad, Coach was heaping praise on you earlier, so that is enough for me to let you go first with your last call. That is not to put pressure on you. That is really a reward for Coach's praise of you. So he's good at grading. He's an educator, as he said, and I think your grade for tonight is solid so far. So consider this potentially the final exam. No pressure on you, but we'll have Coach grade you after you're done with this.
Nah, it's just the closing thoughts. It's the little paragraph that you just kind of put in there to make sure your professor's still reading your paper and right before you cite all your stuff. Now, I mean, it's one that you hope the team puts aside and moves on from it. Look at the stuff you didn't do right. Again, Big Ten is tough on the road. All that, it's just it's frustrating to know that this team has a floor like we have, but we have a ceiling like we have, and you never know what's going to show up from night to night. And you hope that you get the better side. Maybe we're due for that better side. I guess we'll see coming up. Ohio State's going to be out for blood because we beat them. Now they want to beat us at home, and they want to win, but they're having similar struggles that we are. So. I'm feeling fairly confident going into it, and I'll be there to cheer no matter what.
All right. Thanks. And Chad, we appreciate you hopping on to do the show tonight. You'll also be doing some of the heavy lifting after the Purdue game as well, so we appreciate you helping out with that at all. And did an excellent job, as Coach said, all kidding aside. Did a great job. So, Coach, final thoughts from you on tonight's loss.
Yeah, it's frustrating to lose, and it's right to be frustrated. But this team is an inconsistent team. It was in the summer. It was in November. It still is today. Wherever you want to put the blame for that, it is an inconsistent roster. It just is. And Chad, the ceiling and the floor and all of that stuff was again, a great comment, because that's what it is. This team can play bad. And this team can play really, really well, and it is Indiana, and it's 15-6. So, to some extent, I think this team is overachieving. because I think that there are some flaws that are really hard to overcome, and we saw a lot of them tonight. If the post play is not there and the guard play is not there, then there's not much to this team. And when it is, it's very competitive. So it's up to the coaches to get better and work better. It's up to the players to try to find out why they cannot bring the same intensity when they travel, or it'll be another tough one on Saturday. And then hopefully we're home for 2 more games and can get back to comfortable spots. But stay with this program, stay with the team, be frustrated. But there's going to be a few more losses this year. Let's hope there's more wins.
Thanks, Coach. For me, I think I've kind of taken to looking at the season a week at a time, basically, and trying to figure out what would be a good result for this week. I think you came out of the Maryland game disappointed, certainly, but looking ahead to a couple road games, and I think anybody would feel good if they said this team get one of these 2 on the road. So an opportunity to get that out of the way was lost by the way that the team came out in the second half, but the potential to end the week 1-1 is still there going into Ohio State, a team that doesn't have a ton of confidence. Really, as I said, watched a decent amount of that Northwestern game, didn't play well for long stretches of that game. We're all obviously familiar with a team that did not play well for long stretches of a game against Northwestern as well. So it's a familiar feeling, I guess, for everybody, but it is not the kind of game that you would have looked at when Ohio State really had it rolling in mid-December and said, this isn't a game this team cannot win. And one of the comments Archie made after the game against Maryland was they played well enough to win. They also played well enough to lose. I think that speaks to some of the floor and ceiling comments that Chad made, that this team at its best can be competitive and can win just about any game that's left on the schedule at this point. And at its worst, or with long stretches of its worst, as we saw tonight, it can lose to anybody and can lose to anybody handily. The good news from a bracketology perspective is that every game from here on out represents a chance to get a quality win and not necessarily take on a bad loss. You certainly can't turn around and lose all those games, because then the volume of losses accumulates and that really starts to matter. So it really does become a question of how this team can bounce back and try to figure out ways to elongate the stretches of good play and shorten the stretches of poor play. And that starts with the guards. It is certainly cliche to talk about how important backcourt play is in college basketball, or really any level of basketball, but no team, this one or any other, is going to be able to win road games against quality opponents with the accumulation of stats that the backcourt had tonight. Doesn't mean that the post players were blameless for the way that this game played out, but this team has to get its identity back, if you will. If that identity is driving to the basket, trying to get fouled, getting the ball inside, they really deviated from that tonight in the second half, and the result was really poor. So you flip back and you watch these last 2 games and say there was one game where they hardly turned the ball over at all, and one game where they were giving it away all over the place. And so if you look at those 2 and can tell me which team's going to show up in Columbus on Saturday, you're a heck of a lot smarter than I am. So we kind of sit back and wait and try to figure out how this team's going to respond. I'm optimistic that they can bounce back, that they can play in a close game and maybe pull one of these out, get to that 1-1 week that I think everybody would be happy with, and move on from there for some home games, as Coach said, where hopefully they can keep stacking wins from there. So certainly a disappointing game, as we talked about. Team did some things really well in the first half, really struggled in the second half, and now it's up to them to see how they can bounce back and get some confidence away from home, because the road games certainly don't get easier. I think Minnesota and Michigan are the next 2 up after Ohio State, so neither are places where IU has had a great deal of success lately, and both those are teams that have struggled at times, really fighting to get in the tournament as well. So will not be easy to win there, and this team's got to figure out a way to maintain the toughness that it needs away from Assembly Hall to be able to get some of these wins and right the ship a little bit after a game like this. So that will do it for us tonight on this edition of the Assembly Call. We will, as soon as I can actually find the outro, there it is. I'm having a bad second half as well. It happens to the best of us. So if you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to longtime listener Bob Thompson, who produced much of the music you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops with you again on Thursday night. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
All right.
Good job, Chad.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, thanks a lot, Chad. Nice job.
The only thing that maybe could make this better is let's go to Dewey's and get a sausage and mushroom pizza. Or maybe they'll deliver one back there, Andy.
Maybe. We'll see. We shall see. All right. Well, I need to not linger around here because I've got to get this file uploaded, which based on my internet speed will take a little bit here, and then I got to get some rest.
I drive over to the school and sit outside the science wing and connect in my car and upload it because it's much faster than sitting.
Perfect.
Things I do. Hey, thanks. Tough
All
night.
right, thanks, guys.
Yep, I agree. Tough night. Hopefully they bounce back. It was I was really feeling pretty optimistic after the first half. I thought they really did a good job to stick around, and even like I said, I mean, there was even in the beginning of the second half when they weren't playing well. Like you'd gotten, like I said, that one play. You hate to put too much on one play, but man, you make a bucket there, get a little momentum, get within 2 points. You know, we see these huge runs where it's like, can one basket just stop the poor offensive flow and get you a little bit of confidence, and just like you turn around, don't get back on defense, give up a three, and
I know I'm biased, but man, you've got to play Devontae some minutes because you just can't play three guards. But here's the key: if Phinisee's on and Green is manageable, Indiana can win. If Phinisee is off and Green is off, you're going to get beat by 15 to 20. I'm going to test that hypothesis on Saturday because, you know, Smith has 13, Trace Jackson-Davis has 14. That's not awful, but more than anything, those two players in your guard play are very, very key, and you can just tell real quick if Devontae's going to be great, somewhat okay, or bad, and
I felt like tonight
it
was very early of how that was going to go.
Yeah. Well, and there's been games when both those guys have been bad, and you've had Al that has stepped up and done good, but this was a physical team, and against physical teams, Al can't flourish.
I guess my point in all of that is if Phinisee has to have minute restrictions, and he's so important, now you're down to Durham, Franklin, and Green to play. That's not an easy decision to make because at any moment, any 4-minute stretch, Devontae can get you 9 or 10, but he can also kill you. So if you just bench him and only play him 3 minutes or don't play him at all, now you're relying on a freshman and Al Durham to get. It's if anything's critical of Archie, it's roster construction and not winning Quinones or getting a guard that he went maybe too high and then didn't get another guard.
Yeah. Or not trying to last minute dig for some sort of transfer, a Hail Mary transfer.
I mean, it's just Devontae.
Curtis Jones.
Devontae is. I feel sorry for him to some extent.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah, it's.
Well, I mean, honestly,
I definitely felt like tonight was. I definitely felt like tonight was one where it was like, you could just tell he didn't have it.
I agree, and I don't disagree that you sit him in those situations.
Yeah, but I mean, you also have. I mean, at some point,
Franklin was 0 for 3 with a bad turnover in 18 minutes. Phinisee was 0 for 6 with 2 turnovers, and Durham was 1 for 7 with 2 turnovers. It's not like Steve Nash is showing up, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think at least in this one, I would have wanted to see Franklin a little sooner because at least at the end he showed that he could at least drive to the basket.
And I think that's where I would agree. In hindsight, yes.
Yeah, but like you said, again, it's a flip of the coin. Then does Devontae get hot and get you back into it from three?
And it's just it's a fine line, because if you sit him and only play him 2 or 3 minutes, now you got locker room issues. He is your captain. You know what I mean? I mean, there's a whole lot more than just, okay, he's having a crappy game. What do you do?
I don't envy Archie with this decision. Yeah, it's tough.
I think that's ultimately my point. Is it's not so clear cut that bad game sit or bad stretch sit. There's a lot that goes into managing the whole program, and Green is really in the middle of stirring it up in a negative way right now, and it's not good.
Mm-mm.
Unless he's hitting threes. It's just it's like 75% bad. And maybe 25% good, and that's just that's anyway.
Yeah, some of the turnovers are. I can almost take the shots a little bit better than some of the turnovers. I think that's what I.
What was he doing against the press?
Standing still, then dribble backwards, and I mean, admittedly, nobody was really coming to help him out, but he had Demezy on the wing to pass the ball to get it across. And then why you'd choose to rear back and try to throw it over the middle to a guy that with his arms up, that just did not make sense. I was actually surprised Penn State didn't press more. I think they pressed one or two other times. I think Al brought it up the second time, but I was really surprised although they were getting plenty of steals without doing it. So I guess why would you bother risk giving up easy baskets? But yeah, I don't know what he was doing. He was so unaggressive, and then he just stood there for a few seconds. But I think the same thing offensively. It's like when this team's playing well and they're really moving the ball, it's such a difference between him, because even if he's going to pass the ball, there's always a couple dribbles in the middle where it just takes away any kind of flow and momentum. And yeah, he was a rough watch. But yeah, I mean, a team that can't shoot the ball very well, I totally get why it's easy for everybody to sit there and say this guy should never play again. But the reality of the situation is that you need to play him some and figure out what he might have on that given night on a team that can't shoot the ball when he can get hot. But so yeah, the roster construction has kind of hamstrung this team in a way
that ultimately
there's really
is Archie's responsibility, right, Andy? I mean, you put together a team.
Oh yeah.
I think. In my honest evaluation, he had some things left over with the APR and decided to stick with some people. And I think that ended up being a bad decision, that he might have needed to make some changes earlier, or force some changes and get some people in. And I think that's biting him right now. And that is on him. But it's hard to change. It's just hard to change personalities as a coach. You can change, passing angles and shots and stuff like that through practice, but ultimately players have to make decisions too. It's not just input and output like a computer program. There's a human element to it, and if you're soft, man, it's tough.
Yeah, I think that the challenge just comes into certainly there's a lot still to play for this year, and I think it would be an accomplishment to. You'd feel fine about making the tournament, and whatever happens when you get there happens. But then you look at the roster again for next year. You lose Devontae. You bring in Leal as a guard. Galloway, to me, is more of a wing type guy. So you're right back in the same boat where you got four guards again. And if things go, you got a guy like Rob who, everybody loves him to death, but he's had a lot of injury issues. Mm-hmm. Not all the same kinds of issues to say that a guy's injury prone, because one year he had a concussion and this year he's had whatever he's had going on, but you got to prepare yourself for the event that he does that again, and you're once again in trouble without a backup point guard in that scenario. So it'll be interesting to see. There's certainly a lot to be done on the recruiting front and grad transfers and all those kinds of things. So there's still the opportunity to get somebody to do that, but what you don't want to see is repeat the same mistake over again and find yourself in the exact same boat again next year.
And Jordan's more of a 3, right? He's more of a wing himself too.
I think he's a 3, maybe stretch 4. I think eventually, if he
what they're trying to do
is
is to get to wings. Like you see Look at Michigan State with Gabe Brown and Aaron Henry at the 2 and the 3, and they're both really what we would grown up with is threes, right?
Yeah, well, Maryland's got like 11 wing guys like that.
Yeah, and I think the game is going to a point guard, 3 wings, and some post players, and really stretch post players more than back to the basket post players. And so I think that's ultimately that it's interchangeable. That's why I wonder if can Hunter play some 2? Can he guard a 2? If he gets going a little bit and not just backing up Justin, because if you need Justin for 30 minutes, it only gives Hunter 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think there's some opponent twos that are going to blow right by him.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's also a guy who can play a little bit in the post, so he's got a chance to at least make them pay on the other end. If you look at it that way, I thought him being gone was a big factor tonight because Demezi just didn't. I mean, he rebounded well, but otherwise he just didn't provide anything. Didn't take good shots. I mean, the one possession I think I texted on our thing is like he just kind of like wandering around and basically like ran into somebody who had the ball. It was like you're not moving, you're not really setting a screen. I mean, I coach a 3rd grade basketball team. I see people wander around all the time. I know what it looks like. I can't, It's like, are you doing something? You're just like wandering over to them, but you're not really setting a pick for them. You're just kind of there. So
there were even a few times towards the end where I saw Jerome get up, and I mean, I guess he's a happy guy, he's a smiley guy. I saw him smiling and stuff, and I almost was like, just put him in, just try. I mean, they can clean up the floor.
I really do think he had intestinal struggles and didn't
play through it.
Be out of position.
Toughness. Come on, coach. You're talking about toughness.
That would take a certain level of toughness that's beyond.
Yeah, it's one you may never live down if you try to play through that and things don't go the way you want them to. But anyway.
All right. I'm checking out.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, guys. All right, later.